I've got a single shot, a pack of automatic double barrel semi-artillery. I got a new bring a song off to the freakiest all things you've never seen. I'm gonna make it heavy metal storm again, coming after me. 'Cause I got the right to defend what's mine in the face of tyranny.
Hello, my gun-toting friends, and welcome to the Average Joe Gun Show. On today's gun show, we're going to be discussing this 1903 A3 Springfield rifle that's been converted to a sporting hunting rifle. But before we get into it, I'd like to thank our sponsors. Just kidding, I don't have any. So we'll get right into it. Let me give you a quick history on the 1903s before we get into this rifle. The first 1903s were adopted in June of 1903 and were produced by the Springfield Armory and Rock Island Arsenal. But this one in particular was manufactured by the Smith Corona Typewriter Company for World War II. But as you can see, this one is sporterized, and I'll tell you how it ended up that way. In World War II, the US military needed as many rifles as they could get. So starting with the World War II contract for rifles, in a roundabout way, Smith Corona, the typewriter company, was contracted by the United States Ordnance Department to build 100,000 rifles. And that later was up to 380,000 rifles of the 1903 A3. There were many different companies producing the rifles. Remington was producing as many as they could. So the Ordnance Department started negotiations with High Standard Firearms. Well, they were already running at peak capacity, so they wanted to make the barrels and then subcontract the rest of the rifle to the Smith Corona Company. But what ended up happening was the Ordnance Department gave the contract to Smith Corona to build the rifles, and then Remington Arms and High Standard would be the subcontractors to supply the barrels to Smith Corona. But early on, High Standard subcontracted Savage Arms for 5,000 barrel blanks, got them, finished them, and then sent them to Smith Corona to build the rifle. So the first Smith Corona barrels were Savage 6-groove barrel blanks finished by High Standard and then sent to Smith Corona. The next barrels were the High Standard 4-groove barrels, except for 2 months when Remington supplied their 2-groove barrels to keep production up. So this barrel is a High Standard 4-groove barrel with the proper SC for Smith Corona, the flaming bomb for the Ordnance Department, and a 10-43 for October of 43, with matching numbers on the receiver. I'll insert a couple pictures because it's too hard to get it on camera. So there's your quick history of the Smith Corona Typewriter Company producing Springfield rifles for World War II, and now how this became a sporter model. So in the mid-60s, there was a government program where they were selling off used equipment from World War II. And my grandfather got on that program and picked up a 1941 Willys Jeep, which he rebuilt and drove. Well, because he was on that list for the used equipment, the government sent him an offer for their used firearms from World War II. So my grandfather purchased a 1903 Springfield rifle. When he got this rifle, well, he waited around to get the notice on this rifle. When he finally got a notice from the post office to come and pick up his rifle. When he got the rifle and got it home, it was in a small crate where it would be shipped overseas for the war, but they had never shipped it. And when he opened up the crate, it was in wax paper, and inside that was the rifle still in the Cosmoline grease. It was a brand new 1903 Springfield rifle 30-06 that had never been issued to go into the war. He shot it in its stock configuration for a little while and then decided to sporterize it. And his buddy had a stock that could possibly fit it. So with a lot of whittling and sanding, my grandpa fitted into this stock. Then after a little while, he decided to put a scope on it. But the A3 wasn't meant to have a scope. And my grandpa was a machinist, so he decided decided, well, or actually he did, he machined the top of the receiver and drilled and tapped the front of the receiver like a A4 sniper rifle. He also reshaped the bolt handle like an A4 sniper rifle. He had cut this off, re-welded it, and then milled this down and angled it so it would fit on here and clear the scope. This was milled for a red field mount and a 2-power scope. This is not the original scope. This was upgraded later on. So after it was scoped, my grandpa used it for a groundhog and varmint rifle and took it to West Virginia a few times to hunt deer. Later on, it was given to my dad when we were on the farm, that my dad used it to hunt groundhogs with 110 grain soft nose 30-06 rounds, which would turn the groundhogs inside out. So years later, when I was about 9 or 10 years old, I wanted a scope on my 30-30 Winchester, so I picked this monstrous scope out of a Cabela's catalog and got it for Christmas. But it didn't fit. My dad tried to put it on the 30-30 and it didn't fit, and when it didn't fit, he decided there was a much better place to put this scope, and it was on this rifle. So he removed the old 2-power scope and put this 5x20 on this that you could see across the field with. I don't even know if the camera will pick up this 300-yard shot on steel. But at that time, it had short scope mounts on it, which brought this down to the barrel, and the bolt lever didn't completely clear the scope the way I liked. So somewhere in my early 30s, I installed high-rise scope mounts. So now the bolt clears, and the safety, which is a fold-over safety, completely clears now. That's how that operates. Safety on. You're supposed to use your thumb, but it's still hard to get around there. Safety off. Safety is a top throw lever. So you flick it off. Normally it wouldn't have a scope on it back 120 years ago. This was a good scope for the time, but another 20 years later, it needs another upgrade. So a little bit more about this rifle. As I just showed you, if it's cocked, and here's an interesting thing. Notice this has a mushroom end on the bolt. You can cock the hammer like that, or a Springfield is a cock on opening of the bolt. Unlike a Mauser, which cocks on closing. This rifle has a magazine cutoff. Let me show this to you. This is a magazine cutoff right here. Right now, as you can see, it's off. So if You open the bolt, and I have empty rounds to show this. You load your magazine. It will not pick up a round. It's essentially a single shot. So you drop a round in, fire a single round, bring that out, you still have your loaded magazine ready to go. Why they use that, I have no idea. But then, you shut your cutoff off, turn your magazine back on, then your bolt comes back far enough to pick up another round. If I'm in battle, I don't think at any point would I ever want my magazine shut off. I think I want access to all my rounds at all times. The 1903 Springfield had a magazine cutoff. As you can see with the on, the magazine is on. Or you could drop this down, it would shut the magazine off. What would happen is the bolt wouldn't go all the way to the rear a complete throw to pick up the next round. So you can load up your 5 rounds. Like so. The bolt wouldn't pick it up. So essentially your rifle became a single shot rifle where you would have to reload one at a time. Then if you flipped your magazine cutoff on, then you could pick up your next round and go to work. The lockup on this bolt is very interesting. It has dual locking lugs at the front of the receiver. This is the large extractor. But it also has a third locking lug, which drops in at the rear of the receiver. This rifle is in the gray-green Parkerized finish, which is the finish is still perfect. It has the SC for Smith Corona, the bomb, the flaming bomb for the Ordnance Department, and 10 of 43, so October of 43, which matching numbers. The receiver numbers are of course under the scope mount that's been drilled and tapped set on there. The barrels were timed to the receiver. You can see the small line right here, which is the timing mark for the barrel to the receiver. The hole was for an exploded case. If it was over pressure, so it wouldn't blow the bolt back at you, it would release the pressure out of this hole. The triggers were very heavy, about 8 pounds. Take up, heavy trigger, release. And the reason it was so heavy was because here's the wall, the catch for the trigger that holds the firing mechanism back. And all the trigger did, the trigger would slide down off of this mechanism and let this come forward. So you're pull, 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 bang. And when it does go bang, a 30-06, you feel it a bit in your shoulder. Even at a 10-pound rifle with a solid butt plate, your shoulder is your recoil reduction. And after about 20 rounds sighting in, you start to notice it. Is it unmanageable? No, but it does jump a bit. So is it fun to shoot? Yes, it is. Does it need some upgrades after the past 82 years? Yes, it does. It's still basically a brand new 1903 A3 that's still being broke in. It hasn't been shot enough. I'm sure there's not been 1,000 rounds through it. I've only probably put 200 rounds through it myself. but there are things that can make it more accurate. A free floated barrel, a bedded receiver, definitely a 1-inch pad on the end. Trim the stock, add the pad. And this old scope that I got 40 years ago could be upgraded to a low power variable optic or a scout scope for faster target acquisition. But for a 40s rifle that was converted to a sporter in the 60s, had some modifications in the 80s, and a few more upgrades in the early 2000s, it'll still get the job done. So anyway, thanks for watching the Average Joe Gun Show. Don't forget to like, subscribe, share with all your friends. And I don't think I have anything else for you. I definitely have a few bloopers for you right here. So the fist. Well, I just can't get that out. I've messed this up twice. So the first Smith Corona barrels were Savage 6-groove barrel blanks, finished by High Standard. And then the rest were High Standard 4-groove barrels, except for 2 months where Remington supplied barrels of their. So the first Smith Corona barrels were Savage 6-groove barrels, finished. Why can't I get this one out? So the first Smith Corona barrels were Savage 6-groove barrel blanks, finished by High Standard. The rest were High Standard 4-groove barrels for the So the first Smith Corona barrels were Savage 6-groove that holds the firing mechanism back, and all the trigger did, and I just broke my light.